The chamber was silent except for the low hum of machines. A wide circular table stretched across the center, and around it sat the most powerful beings of the Galactic Council. Their eyes, each from different worlds, glowed softly in the dim light. Holographic maps hovered above the table, filled with flickering points of light, representing fleets, planets, and battle projections. For centuries, the Council had been the ultimate authority on war. They had defeated countless enemies, absorbed dozens of civilizations, and reduced entire planets to ash without hesitation. They were proud, certain that their strategies and calculations could not fail. That day, however, their focus was on a new species that had recently entered the stars: humans. The humans had only just begun to spread beyond their home system. Their ships were smaller, their technology crude compared to most Council civilizations, and their fleet numbers laughably low. To the Council, humans were like children who had picked up sticks and stones and wandered into a battlefield of tanks and cannons. One of the Council's senior members leaned forward. His skin shimmered like glass, reflecting the holographic light. His voice was cold, sharp, and certain. "Resistance time, 4.2 hours. The words echoed through the chamber. A ripple of agreement followed. Another member, tall and insect-like, tapped her claws against the surface of the table. "They will fight, yes. They always fight, but numbers do not lie. Within hours, they will be gone. Their fleets will shatter." All around the chamber, the voices joined in agreement. Every simulation they ran showed the same outcome. Humans could not hold. Their ships lacked the shielding technology the Council's forces relied upon. Their weapons were primitive by comparison. Even their communication systems were less advanced, slower, and easier to disrupt. The Council had faced civilizations with far greater power and still crushed them. Against humans, the outcome felt like an afterthought. A younger member of the Council raised a question, his tone more cautious. "But these humans, they are unpredictable. They act without the patterns we expect. Perhaps we should reconsider." He was cut off by laughter. A deep, rumbling voice rolled across the chamber. One of the oldest Council members, whose people had fought in wars long before humanity lit their first campfires, waved a hand dismissively. "Unpredictable? That is the word you use when you cannot explain the mistakes of the weak. They act without order. That is not strength. It is chaos. Chaos does not win wars. It only delays the inevitable." The chamber returned to silence as the Council's analysts fed data into the systems. Across the holographic display, scenarios played out. Human fleets diving forward, human fleets retreating, humans attempting ambushes or negotiations. Every simulation ended the same way. Defeat. "Hours," the glass-skinned one repeated again. "Not days. Not weeks, hours. Their spirit may be strong, but spirit does not stop plasma fire." The Council members nodded. To them it was not arrogance, it was certainty. Their technology had made them masters of the galaxy. No lesser species had ever surprised them. Yet even in their pride there was a sliver of curiosity. "Why do they fight?" one asked softly. The question hung in the air. Unlike other civilizations that surrendered when faced with impossible odds, humans had refused. Their messages to the Council were simple, almost childlike in tone but filled with defiance. "We will not kneel. We will not surrender. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us." This refusal was strange to the Council. Most civilizations bent the knee as soon as they saw the power of the fleets. Others resisted for a time, but always broke. Humans, though, had looked at the impossible and said, "We'll try anyway." It was irritating to some Council members, amusing to others. To the older ones, it was a reminder of the past, when wars were fought not with calculations but with passion. Still, they were convinced that passion alone could never win. The Council dismissed the thought. Numbers, after all, were clear. The holographic clock ticked forward. Predictions updated in real time. Fleet encounter in 16 standard hours. Resistance calculated to collapse 4 hours after contact. The decision was final. The Council released its projection to all members and allies. The humans would fight and they would lose quickly and decisively. The war would be another line in history, a footnote of another primitive race that rose too early. But far away, beyond the Council's cold calculations, humans were preparing in their own way. Unlike the Council chambers, there were no shining walls, no polished tables, no calm voices. Human war rooms were noisy, filled with the buzz of conversation, the clatter of keyboards, the occasional raised voice. Their maps were messy, their simulations imperfect, yet there was something in those rooms the council could not measure: urgency, desperation, and a spark of determination that refused to fade. In that quiet moment before the storm, the two sides stood on opposite ends of the galaxy's judgment. The council, ancient and powerful, sure of their prediction, and humanity, small and fragile, ready to test it. The council believed they had written the ending already: defeat in hours. But history has a way of surprising those who think they know the final chapter. And as the holographic maps flickered, and the council leaned back in their seats, confident of their superiority, the humans were already sharpening their own answer, an answer that would be written not in hours but in minutes. The human war room was alive with noise. It didn't feel polished like the alien council's chambers, where every word was measured and every voice calm. Here, people spoke over each other. Paper maps overlapped with glowing screens, and tired eyes followed every moving dot on the displays. There was no silence, only the sound of urgency. The enemy fleet was bigger. Everyone in the room knew it. Their ships carried stronger weapons, tougher shields, and numbers that made human fleets look like a scattered handful of fishing boats facing a navy. If anyone compared the two sides on paper, there was only one conclusion: humans were going to lose, and yet, nobody in that room looked ready to give up. One officer leaned over the central display, tracing the enemy's projected path with a shaky finger. "They're expecting us to fight straight on," he said. His voice was tired but sharp. "If we give them that, we're done in minutes." Another person, sitting with a tablet balanced on their lap, spoke without lifting their head. "They think we'll follow their rules. We don't need to. We can make our own rules." That was the quiet secret running through every conversation in the room. The aliens relied on technology so advanced it looked like magic. Their fleets fought with clean formations, perfectly measured tactics, flawless timing. But humans had never been perfect. They weren't orderly. They weren't neat. And that was exactly where they found their strength. The plan they began to piece together wasn't about matching the aliens' weapon for weapon. It wasn't about building bigger cannons or stronger shields. They didn't have the time or resources for that. Instead, the humans focused on what they did have: creativity, desperation, and the ability to use anything and everything as a weapon. Some of the ideas sounded almost laughable at first. Old satellites, long retired from service, were marked on maps as potential weapons. Civilian cargo ships, stripped of their usual cargo, were refitted with explosives and hidden cannons. Even outdated drones, the kind that hadn't been used in years, were pulled from storage and given new life with quick modifications. It was messy. It was risky, but it was human. As the plans formed, the mood in the room shifted. Fear never fully left. It sat in the corner like a shadow, reminding everyone what was at stake. But alongside that fear came energy. People who had been awake for almost 2 days straight leaned closer to their screens, eyes burning with focus. Every small idea, no matter how strange, was written down, tested, and sometimes kept. One officer muttered under their breath, almost like a prayer, "They expect hours." "Let's give them minutes," the word stuck. Others repeated it quietly. It wasn't an order. It wasn't part of the official plan, but it became the unspoken motto of the group. When the council analysts ran their simulations, they assumed humans would fight like everyone else, form fleets, move in lines, and clash head-on. But humans didn't see the fight that way. To them, the battle wasn't about fleets, it was about survival. And survival meant using every trick, every hidden card, every ounce of unpredictability they had. Somewhere in the middle of the noise, a commander stood quietly, listening. They didn't interrupt, didn't demand silence, just watched their people argue and build. What mattered most wasn't a single genius idea, but the storm of voices throwing possibilities onto the table. The plan wasn't perfect, far from it. But it was alive, and it was theirs. Reports came in from across human space. Engineers worked in cramped hangars, welding makeshift weapons onto ships not built for war. Pilots trained with drones that were barely holding together, learning to fly them like swarms of angry insects. Even civilians contributed, offering up vessels, tools, or simple manpower to move supplies. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone understood the Council's fleets were stronger, but humans weren't preparing to win a fair fight. They were preparing to fight unfairly, In the middle of one late night, a strategist drew a circle on the map around the enemy's lead ships. "They'll never expect us to hit them here," they said. "They think we'll go for the escorts. But if we cut the head off quickly, the rest falls apart." It was bold. It was dangerous. But as the others leaned in, they could almost see it working. Piece by piece, the picture came together. The plan relied on deception, on feints and sudden strikes, on using weapons the Council didn't even think counted as weapons. It was risky. Every part of it could fail. But if it worked, it would end the battle before the aliens even realized what was happening. Sleep was forgotten. Meals were skipped. The room became a place where time blurred, where hours stretched and folded into each other. Every person knew they were building more than a plan. They were building the chance to prove that humanity was more than what the Council thought. The Council saw numbers. Humans saw possibilities. And through the tired eyes, the caffeine-fueled nights, and the endless arguments, one thing became clear. They weren't just preparing for a battle. They were preparing to show the galaxy that underestimating humans was the biggest mistake anyone could make. When the final draft of the plan was laid out, it didn't look like much. Compared to the neat, polished strategies of the Council, it looked rough, even desperate. But every line on that map, every hidden mark, carried the weight of 1,000 minds working together. A silence fell over the room as they studied it one last time. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt the same thought. This might be the only chance. The Council was certain that the humans' resistance would crumble in hours. But in that noisy, messy, crowded war room, surrounded by tired faces and wild ideas, humanity had found something the Council's machines couldn't calculate. Hope mixed with stubbornness, sharpened into a plan. The galaxy believed they had written humanity's ending, but humans had picked up the pen, ready to rewrite it in their own way. And as the countdown to the first encounter ticked closer, every person in that room carried the same silent promise in their heart. If the Council expects hours, let's finish this in minutes. The moment finally arrived. The stars looked calm, almost too calm, as if the galaxy itself had no idea that one of the most lopsided battles in history was about to begin. Out there in the dark silence of space, the human fleet waited. Ships of all sizes floated together. Some were sleek warships built for combat, but many were not. Old cargo haulers, converted shuttles, even mining vessels patched with makeshift armor, all gathered in a formation that looked uneven and fragile. If an alien had looked at it, they would have laughed. Compared to the Council's fleets, it seemed like a child's attempt at playing war. But every ship there carried something hidden. Every captain, every crew member knew that their presence wasn't just about firepower. It was about the plan. Far in the distance, the Council's ships appeared. They arrived in perfect order, gliding into view with the confidence of a predator that had never known fear. Their hulls gleamed with polished armor. Their weapons glowed with energy, and their lines stretched further than the eye could follow. On the Council's side, everything was calm. Their commanders issued orders in measured tones, already predicting how long it would take for the humans to scatter. To them, this wasn't a real battle. It was a cleanup operation. On the human side, though, the air inside the ships was thick with tension. Pilots gripped their controls tighter than they realized. Technicians whispered to themselves as they checked and rechecked the systems. Nobody said it out loud, but the truth pressed against their thoughts. This might be the end. Then the first exchange came. The alien fleet opened fire with precision. Blazing plasma shots streaked through the void, tearing into the front line of human ships. 2 vessels burst apart almost instantly, breaking into flaming fragments that drifted helplessly. On the Council's screens, this was confirmation of everything they believed. As expected, one of them said calmly. But then something strange happened. The humans didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. The broken ships were replaced by others moving forward, fast and unpredictable. "Return fire," came the human order. And suddenly the dark sky lit up with missiles, drones, and energy bursts. But it wasn't just about the shots, it was about where they were going. Instead of focusing on the enemy's front line, the humans targeted the core. Their weapons aimed at communications relays, sensor arrays, and support ships, the weak spots the Council never imagined anyone would attack first. A swarm of drones shot forward, dozens at first, then hundreds. They weren't powerful on their own, but they moved like a chaotic storm, Alien gunners fired at them, but for every drone destroyed, 3 more slipped past, weaving and darting unpredictably. They weren't trying to destroy ships outright. They were jamming sensors, scrambling signals, and forcing the Council fleet into confusion. Inside the Council's command chambers, alarms began to sound. The neat, clean battle map blurred with interference. Officers scrambled to adjust, but the simulations hadn't prepared them for this. They were expecting a predictable fight, not chaos. On the human side, cheers rose as the first alien ship's shields flickered and collapsed. A mining vessel of all things had hurled a stream of heavy rocks at it, projectiles so simple and crude that the advanced shielding system hadn't even registered them as a threat. The rocks tore straight through the hull, disabling engines and sending the massive ship drifting helplessly. The humans didn't waste time. They pushed harder. Every move was fast, sharp, and unpredictable. Old satellites that had been hidden earlier lit up suddenly, blasting signals that blinded the Council's targeting systems. Civilian ships rushed in with suicide maneuvers, releasing swarms of automated pods before pulling away at the last second. Warships punched holes straight into the alien formation, then broke apart into smaller groups, attacking from every angle. To the Council, it was madness. To the humans, it was strategy. Minutes passed, and the battlefield looked nothing like the simulations the Council had prepared. Their fleets, usually smooth and coordinated, were now scattered and stumbling. Orders clashed, signals broke apart, and captains found themselves isolated under attack from directions they hadn't expected. A human commander's voice crackled through the comms. They wanted hours. "Give them minutes!" Across the fleet, that cry became fuel. Crews pushed their ships harder. Pilots flew with reckless skill. And every person carried the thought that if they could just push a little more, they could change everything. The alien flagship, a massive vessel that symbolized the Council's dominance, became the next target. The humans had saved their most dangerous tricks for it. Drone swarms crashed into its hull, detonating explosives along the surface. Jamming signals cut off its connection to the rest of the fleet. And then, in a move no simulation could have predicted, an old cargo hauler, stripped down to little more than engines and explosives, rammed straight into its side. The explosion tore through the flagship, breaking its shields, gutting its central core. For the first time in centuries, the Council's banner ship burned. Silence filled the alien command chambers. What had begun as certainty was now disbelief. Their projections had said 4 hours. But only 17 minutes had passed since the first shot, and already their fleet was breaking. On the human side, exhaustion mixed with adrenaline. Nobody knew if they would survive the next hour, but they knew they had done something impossible. They had turned the galaxy's prediction upside down. The Council thought they understood humans. They thought humanity was weak, primitive, reckless, but in those few short minutes of battle, the humans showed something the Council had never measured: the strength of unpredictability, the courage of desperation, and the power of refusing to play by someone else's rules. The stars that had seemed so calm at the start were now alive with fire, with wreckage, with the echo of a truth that would spread across the galaxy. Humans did not fight like anyone else. And in that moment, with fleets still clashing and explosions still lighting up the void, one thing became clear. This battle would not be remembered for hours of resistance. It would be remembered for minutes of defiance that changed everything. The Alien Council had never known silence like this. Inside their command chamber, the air was heavy. The usual calm voices, the confident discussions, the polite acknowledgments of victory, they were gone. Instead, the only sounds were alarms, crackling comm signals, and the faint hum of systems struggling to update a battle they could barely understand. They had predicted hours, 4 hours and a fraction to be exact. But now, less than 20 minutes since the first engagement, their fleet was collapsing. The great flagship, the pride of their civilization, had been torn apart in front of their eyes. Its burning wreckage floated across the holographic map like a wound, and even the Council's most experienced commanders were speechless. That ship wasn't just metal and engines, it was a symbol. It was the banner of their power, the one thing that was never supposed to fall, and yet it had. In the chamber, voices finally began to rise. "Impossible," one shouted, slamming a hand against the table. "Their weapons cannot do this. Their numbers are too small." Another voice, strained and nervous, replied, "It is happening, look." The officer gestured at the flickering displays where human swarms of drones were tearing through another battleship's communication systems. "They are not fighting correctly," a council member hissed. "They move without pattern. They strike at random." "No," another voice said softly, almost trembling. "Not random. Look closer. They are choosing every strike. They are aiming for the parts we thought unimportant." The chamber fell quiet again, but not the comfortable silence of control. It was the silence of doubt. For the first time in generations, the council's certainty had cracked. Meanwhile, out in the battlefield, the humans pressed forward. On board their ships, crews shouted over the roar of alarms. Engineers patched systems with whatever they had. Wires twisted together, panels ripped from walls, sparks flying as hands worked faster than thought. Pilots pushed their ships past safe limits, engines glowing brighter and brighter as they forced impossible maneuvers. Nobody was fighting for perfection. They were fighting to survive and to make every second count. The motto whispered in the war room days before now echoed across the fleet. They want hours. Give them minutes, and minute by minute the humans were keeping that promise. A group of small human ships darted between two massive alien cruisers. They looked fragile, like toys lost in the shadow of giants. But then all at once the small ships scattered, releasing pods that clung to the cruisers' hulls. A second later, explosions rippled along their surfaces, knocking out engines and leaving the massive vessels spinning helplessly. Another squadron of human fighters dove straight toward an alien carrier, its hangars glowing with energy as it prepared to launch reinforcements. Instead of firing from a distance, the humans charged right inside, flooding the hangars with drones and detonating charges. The carrier's launch bays collapsed inward, its reinforcements destroyed before they could even join the fight. Every tactic was fast, desperate, and brutally effective. The council watched as their neat formations fell apart. Captains begged for orders, but the central command could barely respond. With the flagship gone, coordination was in shambles. The humans weren't just fighting ships, they were fighting the very structure of the council's way of war. Minutes kept passing. 10, 15, 20. Each one felt like an eternity in the chamber. Each one another cut into the council's pride. Finally, one of the senior members spoke. His voice was low, tight with disbelief. "We underestimated them." The words hung in the air like a sentence. Nobody argued. Nobody laughed. Everyone knew it was true. The council had thought humans were primitive. They thought humanity's stubbornness was nothing but noise before defeat. But what they saw now was something terrifying. An enemy that refused to play by the rules. An enemy that turned weakness into strength. An enemy that could take minutes and make them matter more than hours. On the battlefield, the alien retreat signals began to flash. It started small, one isolated ship too damaged to continue. Then another, then another. Soon, entire squadrons were pulling back, their captains deciding that survival was better than following impossible orders. For the humans, this was the moment they had fought for. Their ships were battered, their resources stretched thin, but their spirit was unbroken. They pushed the retreating forces, hammering them with every trick they had left. Explosions lit up the stars, debris scattered across the void, and the once proud fleet of the council became a scattering of broken ships fleeing the fight. Back in the chamber, chaos reigned. "Order them back," one commander shouted. "They won't listen," another replied. "Our fleets do not retreat." "They are retreating!" The chamber that had once been filled with calm certainty was now a storm of panic. For the first time, the council faced the reality that their empire had weaknesses, and those weaknesses had been exposed by the very species they thought would fall in a few hours. 17 minutes. That was the number flashing on the displays when the flagship fell. 17 minutes to turn victory into defeat. 17 minutes to shatter centuries of arrogance. On the human side, exhausted cheers rose through the ships. Crews slumped in their seats, drenched in sweat, shaking from adrenaline. Engineers cried with relief as systems finally cooled. Pilots grinned through exhaustion, their hands still gripping controls as if afraid to let go. They had done it. It wasn't perfect. Many ships were gone. Many lives were lost. The battlefield was littered with human wreckage just as much as alien. But the point wasn't survival without scars. It was survival at all. And more than survival, it was victory. The humans had faced the strongest fleet in the galaxy and ended the fight in less than 20 minutes. The Council's prediction had been wrong. Their numbers, their calculations, their arrogance all shattered. The news spread quickly. Across human space, families watching the skies received the reports. Across the galaxy, other civilizations listened in disbelief. The Council, the unbeatable power that had ruled for so long, had been pushed back. And it wasn't by another great empire. It was by humanity, a young, small, underestimated race that refused to kneel. Back in the Council chamber, no one dared speak for a long time. The holographic display still showed fragments of their fleets limping away, humans chasing them in bursts of fire and light. Finally, one voice broke the silence. What have we done? The answer was clear, though no one wanted to say it. They had awakened something they did not understand. The humans had been tested in fire, and they had answered in minutes. And now the Council had to face a terrifying thought. What would happen if humanity kept growing, kept building, kept fighting? The battle was over. The war was not. But one truth would never be forgotten. The Council predicted hours, and humanity delivered victory in minutes. The flashes of plasma fire, the roar of explosions, the endless alarms inside human ships, all of it had faded into silence. Only drifting wreckage remained, scattered across the dark sea of stars. Some of it belonged to humans, much of it to the Council. Fragments of once proud ships spun slowly, glowing faintly as fires burned out. For the humans who survived, the silence felt unreal. The crew stared at their screens, their hands still trembling, their hearts pounding in their chests. Minutes ago, they were certain they might never see another sunrise. Now, against every prediction, against every calculation, they were alive. And more than that, they had won. Inside one of the command ships, the crew sat in stunned quiet. Nobody moved for several seconds. Then slowly a laugh broke out. It wasn't loud at first, just a shaky sound of disbelief. But soon others joined. Tired, breathless laughter filled the ship. Some cheered. Some cried. Some simply leaned back in their seats and closed their eyes, whispering to themselves, "We did it." The victory didn't feel real. Not yet, but the messages soon confirmed it. Reports came in from across the fleet. Alien ships in retreat, human forces still holding the battlefield secure. Against all odds, the humans had forced the strongest fleet in the galaxy to run. The word spread quickly across human space. Families who had waited with fear gathered around screens and radios, listening. Entire cities broke into celebration as the news reached them. People filled the streets, cheering, hugging strangers, waving whatever flags they could find. For the first time in history, humanity had stood against the galaxy's most powerful empire and survived. But beyond the cheers, there was also a quieter truth. The cost had been heavy. Ships were lost. Lives were gone. The victory was not clean or easy. It was bought with sacrifice, with bravery, with desperation turned into strength. The humans didn't forget that. Even in celebration, they remembered. Far away in the Council's chambers, the mood was very different. The members sat in heavy silence. Their once proud voices were gone, replaced by shame and disbelief. The reports on their screens were undeniable. Their fleets had been broken, their flagship destroyed, their prediction humiliated. For centuries, they had believed themselves untouchable. Their calculations had always been right. Their victories had always been certain. But now their arrogance had been shattered in less than 20 minutes by a species they thought of as children. They were supposed to fall in hours, one member whispered. They did not fall at all, another replied bitterly. The Council struggled to understand. They searched for answers in their data, trying to explain what had gone wrong. But no chart, no projection, no calculation could fully capture what had happened. It wasn't about numbers. It was about spirit, about will, about the refusal to surrender, and that was something the Council had never measured. For the first time, fear crept into their thoughts. Not fear of defeat in a single battle. That could be replaced, repaired, rebuilt. It was fear of the future. If humans could do this now, so early in their journey to the stars, what would they become in the centuries to come? The Council sent warnings to their allies. They labeled humanity as a Category X threat, a title reserved only for the most dangerous forces in the galaxy. They told others, do not underestimate them. Do not provoke them. Do not forget what they can do in minutes. But by then, the galaxy had already heard the story. Other civilizations, long oppressed by the Council, whispered with hope. They spoke the word humans like a spark in the dark. If a young, fragile race from the edge of the galaxy could stand up to the Council, then maybe others could too. The idea spread quietly, dangerously like fire beneath the surface. For humanity, the victory became more than just a memory. It became a symbol. The phrase, "hours predicted, minutes delivered," was repeated across every corner of their world. It was painted on walls, shouted in streets, printed on banners. Soldiers carried it into training. Children repeated it at school. It became part of who they were. It wasn't about arrogance. It wasn't about thinking they were the strongest. It was about remembering that even when the odds are impossible, even when the galaxy says you will fall, there is still a chance if you fight, if you think differently, if you refuse to surrender. In the years that followed, humans rebuilt what they had lost. They repaired ships, trained new fleets, and studied everything they had learned from the battle. But more importantly, they carried the spirit of that day forward. They didn't call themselves invincible. They didn't believe victory was guaranteed. But they knew now, deep in their bones, that they could not be underestimated again, and the Council never forgot. Every meeting, every plan, every new conflict carried the shadow of that battle. Whenever they looked at timelines and calculations, whenever they made predictions, they remembered the humans. They remembered how quickly minutes could rewrite history. Back on Earth, as the first anniversary of the battle arrived, people gathered to remember. Families lit candles for those who were lost. Leaders gave speeches about courage, sacrifice, and hope. And in every corner of the planet, the same words were spoken. We were told we had hours. We answered in minutes. The story spread beyond Earth, told and retold by those who had been there. Pilots spoke of the moment they saw the alien flagship fall. Engineers described the chaos of patching systems mid-battle. Civilians recalled how they gave up their ships, their tools, their time to support the fight. Each story added to the legend, shaping it into more than just history. It became part of humanity's identity. And so, what began as a prediction of defeat turned into something far greater. It became a lesson not just for the Council but for the galaxy and for humanity itself. Never assume the ending is already written. Never underestimate the ones who refuse to give up. And never forget that sometimes, minutes can change the course of forever. The stars remained silent witnesses as humanity carried this truth forward. They had been tested and they had answered. The Council predicted human defeat in hours. Humanity ended the conflict in minutes, and the galaxy would never be the same again.